To strangle Berlin, Stalin turned off everything he could touch. Roads, closed. Railways, dead. 2 million people left inside a broken city and told, without a single shot fired, give up or starve. What he couldn't touch was the sky. So the Western powers tried something no one had ever done before. Keep an entire city alive using nothing but airplanes. And hope. And the man who ended up winning that bet started with 2 chocolate bars and a promise through a fence. June 24th, 1948. Soviet checkpoints slam shut every road into Berlin. Rails go dead. 2 million civilians wake up in a city that now has no ground connection to food, fuel, or the outside world. The Soviet command expects capitulation in weeks. Let the Western powers try feeding a city from the sky. Winter will finish what the blockade starts. By summer's end, children line Tempelhof's fence watching silver C-54s land every 3 minutes, each carrying flour, coal, milk powder, whatever fits in sacks. They don't shout. They watch in silence, eyes tracking each approach. On one of these days, Lieutenant Gail Halvorsen walks to that fence. A boy asks in broken German, "You'll come back tomorrow? Do not give up on us." Halvorsen touches the chocolate in his pocket and promises, "I'll wiggle the wings. Watch for me." What the Soviets didn't know, a tiny promise to starving children would become the weapon that broke their blockade's will. The question wasn't whether Berlin could survive on air alone. It was whether hope could be airdropped. The next day, a C-54 settles down the glide path. Strapped inside the flight bag, candy tied to handkerchiefs, knotted quickly in a crew tent. As the wheels touch concrete, the pilot rocks the wings. Minutes later, paper and cloth tumble from the sky behind the field's edge. It's just a handful of little sails that yank and drift and fall into grasping hands. The kids laugh, then clap their hands over their mouths. By the end of that week, the children whisper about Onkel Wackelflügel, Uncle Wiggly Wings. Letters appear, written in tight, careful script. When you see the white chickens, drop it there. All will be okay. Someone has drawn a map with crooked streets and a little courtyard, a sketch of a hen coop like a landmark in a city burned of most of its landmarks. A few slips of chocolate tied to cloth become Operation Little Vittles. The effort expands into a pipeline running from American kitchens to Berlin's sidewalks. A pilot promised a fence full of children he would come back, and he did. The first reversal happens in a child's fist, a square of chocolate that wasn't supposed to exist in this city anymore, landing soft as a moth. The numbers tell part of the story. Flights stack into the corridors minutes apart. The city needs roughly 5,000 tons of supplies every single day just to survive. On early milestone days, the airlift delivers about 4,500 tons, close to what the blockade demands. The handkerchief parachutes multiply from dozens in the first weeks to hundreds within a month, a scale you can count from a fence. More than 2 million civilians depend on this air corridor for their next meal. The first candy drop fits into a single pilot's pocket. Halvorsen chooses to risk a small rule to keep a tiny promise. His officers might forgive handkerchiefs drifting over a field if the result is a city that doesn't lose heart. He decides that a rule and a conscience are in conflict and goes with the conscience. The physics of the parachute drop matters. A candy bar dropped from a transport at speed could break a nose. The handkerchief parachute solves this by increasing drag, slowing the descent, and stabilizing the fall. Crews time these drops to the turnarounds. Taxi in, unload sacks of flour or coal, taxi out, and on the outbound roll, a crewman flicks the small parachutes out of the window or hatch. It's improvised, it's safe, and it's additive. No loss to cargo, no slowdown to throughput. The blockade rests on contempt. Let them try. Winter will teach them. Those fluttering handkerchiefs seem petty to the planners, but a candy parachute can't warm a flat. Coal can. The system taking shape on the runways is not ready for winter. On one August day, the sky itself seems to gang up on the airlift, and chaos takes its shot. On August 13th, 1948, Rain comes sideways across the approach lights at Tempelhof. Through the windscreen, the sky looks like steel wool. A C-54 rides the glide path with a crosswind trying to twist its nose, and the co-pilot keeps one hand flat on the throttles, the other braced on his knee. He can't see the runway yet. He hears the tires of the last aircraft still skittering, and even with the windows sealed, he smells hot rubber. The headset hisses. Cleared to land. Continue approach. Negative. Go around. Go around. Behind those voices sits Master Sergeant Wilfred Kranz, hunched over a GCA scope in a hut that shakes when a 4-engine transport taxis past. RAF Corporal William Black leans so close his nose nearly touches the green glass, speaking in a slow, calm rhythm. Around them work Flight Lieutenant Alan Green, Flight Lieutenant Edward Atwell, Corporal Eric Renshaw, Aircraftman Peter Stevenson. Their job? Put a heavy transport onto the same thin strip of concrete every single minute, in weather that keeps trying to erase it entirely. Through the headset comes the incantation. Left, left, steady, glide path good, 3/4 mile, check gear, check flaps, slightly high, bring it back, steady, 3, 2, 1. Pilots match their heartbeat to the voice. Crews will call August 13th Black Friday, though nothing crashes. A ground vehicle sticks where it shouldn't. A plane tries to land out of turn. Someone circles who was told not to. For the first time, the system breaks. What comes next changes everything. Command's word arrives swift. No more sightseeing in the pattern. Fly the gauges. No exceptions. Visual approaches stop. Instrument approaches become mandatory. Turnarounds become timed. Pilots stare at dials while ground crews choreograph every unload, with seconds shaved where nobody thought seconds existed to shave. Sling here, chock there, signal now. Generals and reporters are kept off the ramp. Throughput is oxygen. Within days of adopting strict instrument discipline and ruthlessly regular patterns, the airlift clears more than 4,000 tons in a single day, a 50% jump from what they'd managed before. The Soviet blockade's calculation becomes wrong for the first time. The approach cadence tightens from gaps measured in minutes to a rhythm you can set a clock to. On record days at Tempelhof, it becomes about 1 arrival per minute. By the time you're at midfield downwind, you can see the man before you landing and the man behind you turning base. Everyone has to be perfect enough. The real decision under pressure isn't made by one hero. It's made by dozens of controllers and hundreds of crews on a bad day. Do not improvise. When the rain beats the glass and the tower stacks you higher than you like, you don't sneak in. You go around when told. You trust the hut with the green glow. After a tight approach ends safely, a pilot keys his radio and says quietly, "Thank you, GCA." Ground-controlled approach turns fog and rain from fate into work. A radar beam scans the approach path and shows a blip for your aircraft on a green screen. Controllers watch your position, left or right of center, and your altitude up or down the glide slope, then speak corrections that line you up with the runway and your descent profile. Instead of eyeballing a dark smear that might be concrete, you get a voice translating physics into timing. Slightly right. On glide. Begin descent. Every approach becomes the same approach. Planes land at safe, shorter intervals without needing to see anything. Tie that to hard rules. No orbits in the pattern, no last-second dives to make it. And the bridge stops being brave and starts being precise. By June 1949, less than a year after the blockade tightened, the Gatow controllers land their 10,000th radar landing. Approach spacing converges on roughly 1 aircraft every minute at peak operations, turning a runway into a conveyor belt. But the runways can't swallow what's coming. There's only one answer. Build a runway out of rubble in 90 days. August 5th, 1948, French sector. Stakes drive into sandy ground. Berliners arrive on foot, on bicycles, in carts with axles that creak. Many are women in headscarves and thin coats that show elbow bones when they bend. They carry shovels with splintered handles and buckets worn from other wars. The work is repetitive. Move rubble, crush it, level it, roll it, pour over it, repeat in the rain. Engineers from the French sector pace off lengths and drive markers. A foreman weighs prudence against speed. A squall line darkens the horizon, a grey bruise across the sky. Pour now, he says, because an hour lost is a day lost, and because hot asphalt laid into a cold wind still sets if the rollers keep moving long enough. Men and women drop their tools and grab the sides of a drum like pallbearers, tip it, and watch black syrup hit broken brick with a hiss. Steam lifts like smoke. Nearly 18,000 people work 3 shifts over 3 months. 4 in 10 are women. 10,000 drums of asphalt arrive by air, planes bringing the stuff that will let more planes come. When the runway opens, it stretches nearly 8,000 feet long, one of the longest in Europe at the time. A city mined for brick by bombing pours those same bricks back into a surface that takes weight and gives back time. A grader breaks a tooth and could stop for the night. Instead, a woman, hair tucked under a scarf, takes 2 boys and a sheet of steel, working the edge by hand with shovels and a farmer's eye for slope. The rollerman sees and nods. They keep going. The first transport to touch Tegel lands on Berlin backs and hands. Airfields are layers. Bombing left Berlin with brick. Crush it to aggregate, and it spreads the load of a heavy aircraft across area, reducing stress on the subsoil. Rollers compact until density meets target. Asphalt binds and seals. Rain has to shed from the surface, and the asphalt can only pour within a narrow temperature window. 3 shifts matter. The layer compacted at dusk holds enough heat to take the binder at dawn. If the requirements are met, the runway carries planes. We will lay a road for the sky. It was a joke on the day, and then it wasn't. You carry, I'll tamp. 2 friends trading jobs so neither collapses. By early November, just 3 months after the first stake hit the ground, the runway opens. The first landing rolls to a stop, and a crew chief jumps down into a cheering that sounds like a home game win. Lanes are open. With them open, something audacious becomes possible. On a November morning in 1948, folding chairs scraped across the floor of a parish hall in Chicopee, Massachusetts. The room smelled like coffee and school paste. Mary Connors stood with a notebook, a college student with her sleeves rolled up. She was thinking about boxes. A motion was made and a committee formed. Operation Little Vittles, Chicopee Division. Within days, more than 20 schools signed on. Someone's mother volunteered a church gymnasium as a packing site. A reporter wrote a short piece and spelled a name wrong. It still worked. Kids with scissors cut handkerchiefs into squares. Needle and thread bit the edge while a teacher tied double knots. Cocoa powder scent rose every time a new box opened. Piles of twine scratched rings into wooden tables. A city more than 1,000 miles away would soon learn that strangers knew their children's names, because those names were written on notes slipped under twine. From Johnny in grade 4, handwriting became cargo. Captain Lawrence Caskey picked up the morale line when Halvorsen rotated home and made sure the candy drops continued without hurting anyone or knocking the schedule off track. His desk held requests, maps, letters from 9-year-olds who believed that if they drew the chicken yard right, a pilot could find it the way a bird finds a field. One boy named Peter Zimmerman wrote, "You are a pilot. I gave you a map. How did you guys win the war anyway?" Caskey smiled and then thought about traffic patterns and liability and the 1,000 other things that turn a kind gesture into a complicated operation. He formalized kindness through discipline. Drops only when safe and authorized. No low-level stunts. Integration of candy parachutes with regular turnarounds so the main job never slowed. Everything stayed in its place. Stateside committees packed and labeled parcels that moved by rail and truck to airfields hosting airlift units. Base volunteers received bags of handkerchief parachutes and candy, pre-bundled in weights that made the descent safe and predictable. Each package contained a slip with a child's name or return address. Pilots kept a small, separate satchel ready for the fence or the outbound leg past a known courtyard. Drops never happened on short final approach, never in crowded urban canyons, never if weather or traffic made extra maneuvers risky. Most occurred adjacent to airfields or in open spaces where kids gathered on rumor days. The whole pipeline lived in the margins of the real mission, but never fought it. More than 20 schools in one small city transformed a gymnasium into a factory. Candy and handkerchiefs added up to tens of thousands of small parachutes, eventually accumulating to many tons over the course of the operation. When the millionth ton of essential cargo arrived in early 1949, morale and mass coexisted without collision. Some people called it a stunt. Letters arrived in America from children who caught something soft and sweet that day and kept the string. The skepticism couldn't stand against paper in a child's hand that had traveled farther than any shell in the last war. By spring of 1949, Captain Kasky had kept Little Vittles running for months. Peter Zimmerman's letters continued to map his neighborhood. Pilots laughed and checked the maps anyway. Dorothy Groger organized from her kitchen. What had started as a committee meeting in a parish hall had become a rhythm. In the months that followed, when the system was pushed to its absolute limit, the answer would arrive one airplane at a time. April 16th, 1949, Tempelhof. Stand with your eyes closed and count 1 Mississippi. You can mark the next arrival with your finger. The day has a beat. Controllers feel it in their throats when they speak. Cleared to land. Water. Another breath. Cleared to land. The GCA hut hums. Scopes warm. Fingers steady on switches that reset the sweep line after line. Krantz calls a correction. Black eases a pilot's nose by degrees. Atwell and Green slide into the rhythm. If music could move coal, it would sound like this. Nearly 1,400 flights in a single day, almost 13,000 tons. On the ground, a flight every minute, ground crews throwing slings and yanking pallets into trucks that cough and lurch into the city streets. A loader splits the pad of his hand on a nail head. Someone wraps it with friction tape. He goes back to the sling. A minute isn't just a minute today. It's someone's stove tomorrow. It's someone's child not shivering at 3 in the morning. Families stand at the fence. A girl who was 7 last summer is 7.5 now. Her hair's longer. She watches the clock. An old man counts with his lips, mouthing the rhythm. Men with cameras take pictures of aircraft sifted into the sky like grain through a chute. Coal dust finds a home in the crease of every elbow on the ramp. The white letters on mechanics' coveralls turn grey by noon. A pilot comes in a touch hot and a touch high. He waves off. One go-around lets the beat stay intact. A single decision keeps the string of landings behind him from breaking like dominoes. Throughput is a chain where each link is a minute. When aircraft space at 60-second intervals, any delay compounds. A landing that floats too long forces a late exit, which blocks the threshold for seconds that eat 2 more approaches. A bulky pallet winch adds another minute and cascades into taxi congestion. One mistake becomes 2, becomes 3, becomes an hour lost. The tower, GCA, taxi control, ramp crews, pilots, they move like a single organism. At 60 seconds, a runway converts into a conveyor capable of moving thousands of tons in a day. One ego trip, one sloppy turn, one moment of greed, and you swallow an hour. Record days happen when everyone chooses the chain over themselves. 1 minute between landings on the record day. Nearly 13,000 tons lifted and dropped in 24 hours. Enough coal to heat hundreds of thousands of rooms when cold still bites and doesn't negotiate. 1,400 flights. Start your breakfast with the first, and you'll hear the last when breakfast comes around again. By July, there will be 2 million tons. A blockade is a boast. We can make you stop. This day is the answer. We can make you irrelevant. Newspapers print the numbers. Enemy planners read them like a diagnosis they didn't want. Controllers' headsets carry the rhythm. Cleared to land. Taxi left at the high speed. Next on final. Continue. Good approach. A loader's shout that no microphone catches. Move! 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 One controller makes a quick call that keeps two approaches from folding into each other. A family at the fence stops counting to cheer a crew chief jumping from a truck to the ramp with a sling in both hands. From cohesion to proof. The blockade's premise breaks in the open, in daylight, with witnesses inside and outside the fence. Everyone sees it. The sky shows what it can do. The ledger reminds you what it costs. A July night will write 3 names into the story that no one wants to read aloud, and everyone must. July 12, 1949, near Gatow. A transport on approach, 3 men doing their jobs. Captain Cecil Golding commanding, Henry Thomas Newman beside him, Peter James Edwards at the radio. Something in the engines is wrong, a note off pitch, a needle where it shouldn't be. They climb the checklist, but altitude is a bank account that won't extend credit. When the ground comes, it's hard and final. 3 names join a book that tries to make order of loss by writing in neat lines. Radial engines forgive you right up until they don't. One bank fails, you might fly through it. But when that failure couples with weather or low energy state on approach, the airplane can sink faster than you can arrest it. Good men run the procedure perfectly and still lose to physics. A few weeks' distance on the calendar, May 12, 1949, the barriers come down. The first trucks rumble with diesel coughs that used to signal threat and now signal relief. Crowds don't riot, they breathe. The whole premise of the blockade, "We can make you stop," has become its own failure. We have stopped. The air bridge doesn't vanish when the roads reopen. Instead, it winds down with the kind of respect you give a machine that's done what nobody believed possible. By July 2nd, the airlift marks 2 million tons, a weight that began as an impossible idea and became the measure of a city's survival. Early 1970s, Berlin. The room is small, tidy, warm. Mercedes Simon, now Mercedes Wild, sets a browned envelope on a table whose wood grain looks like a river on a map. Gail Halvorsen, older now, his face lined with both mischief and discipline, recognizes his own handwriting. It's the same promise, preserved in paper. When you see the white chickens, drop it there. Outside, jets cross a sky that once held only propellers as they eat, laugh, and remember together. Ernst Reuter stood before the world and said, "You peoples of the world, look on this city." That call got answered in names and deeds. Every landing light switched on in fog at midnight carried the same weight. We will not abandon this city. Not a line from a press conference. The meaning lived in every landing, one after another. A book of remembrance lists dozens of RAF dead by name. More than 100 souls, American, British, and Allied, gave everything. 2 million tons moved by summer 1949. Weight turned into warmth, light, and bread. One city, 2 million people, kept through a winter by air. The story opened with a confident impossible. It closes with a quiet house where a letter rests beside a plate, and nobody is hungry. Long after the sound has gone, wing lights pass across a room's ceiling one more time.